Lots of basketball stuff to talk about on this episode of the show. From the Cardinals reaching out to Emoni Bates and Jeff Walz adding another transfer for next year's squad. Let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. As I mentioned, a lot of basketball talk for this episode of the show. We will begin discussing the Cardinals reaching out to Memphis transfer Emoni Bates. We will then transition into the high school recruiting realm where Kenny Payne and the coaching staff have gotten in the mix for highly ranked four-star recruit Tyrell Ward. And then finally, we will discuss Jeff Walz adding Syracuse guard transfer Chrislyn Carr onto the team for next season. We'll start out talking about Emoni Bates. The Cardinals reached out to the Memphis transfer recently after he entered the portal not too long ago. I think maybe even less than a week ago, but I'm not too awful certain. Ever since the news came out that the Cardinals have reached out to Bates, it seems like the fan base has been a little divided in the response. There are there's a section of the fan base that didn't necessarily take the news well due to the fact that Emoni didn't necessarily have the greatest freshman season at Memphis last year. And there was another sector of the fan base that said, well, he's very talented, played his first year of college ball at age 17. So, there's a lot of upside that the Cardinals could definitely use if he's able to put it together and develop. So I'm personally in more so of the second sector of the fan base. Look, there's no secret that Bates didn't necessarily live up to the hype that was surrounding his freshman season. The former number one overall recruit in I think it's the 2022 class, reclassified into this past year's class due to the age requirements for the NBA draft, was going to have to stay for 2 seasons, or at least spend 2 years in college or the G League before he was eligible for the NBA draft. So this year he played at age 17 for most of the season. Overall, averaged 9.7 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 1.3 assists, only shot the ball about 39% from the field, 33% from behind the arc, 65% from the free throw line. So I think that there is a conversation that needs to be had about Emoni Bates' upside. Do I think that he lived up to the expectations that were, placed on this season for him? Of course not. He's been long, revered as this can't miss, generational prospect that, has been compared to the likes of LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and has been getting a lot of media attention since his sophomore seasons of high school. Now, it seems like, the rest of the competition has kind of caught up to him, especially size-wise. There's been concerns with his 6'9" frame. I think his wingspan is only like 6'7" or something like that. So that's kind of raised some concerns in terms of his NBA draft stock. But ultimately, for the Louisville Cardinals, here's my line of thinking. This might not necessarily be the popular take because, if you watched Emoni Bates last season, had some very solid games right out of the gate for Memphis, scored in double figures in the first 3 contests of the season, and then kind of struggled throughout. Missed a good chunk of the season with a back injury. And let me just go ahead and say that when I watched games in which he played at Memphis this year, it looked like Penny Hardaway had him in a role that maybe he wasn't necessarily comfortable with, or maybe this makes a little bit more sense. Maybe it's a role that doesn't necessarily fit his skill set, to a T. So I think that him playing the lead guard position for Memphis, he didn't necessarily look all that comfortable in it. I think that he looked more comfortable playing off ball as a wing, which at Louisville is what I think that his role would be, as a wing that's able to create his own shot and give high effort on the defensive end. I think that this is a case of people trying to deliver I guess you could say deliver a conclusion before the story ends. The fact of the matter is, Emoni Bates is only 18 years old. He reclassified and played, a good chunk of the season at 17 years old. To suggest that he is a bust, I think it's a little bit premature. Now, will he reach the level of play that, many recruiting analysts and experts had, projected him to reach in his NBA career in the future? Perhaps not, maybe. I mean, it's way too early to tell. I think that there is a ton of talent there. Once he's able to add some more weight onto his frame, I think that the ball handling will be able to improve. He's going to be able to, create his own shot in a little bit better fashion. There is some concerns over shot selection, over overall, cohesiveness in the offense, and him not trying to take things in like isolation settings, a good part of games. And I think that kind of gets overblown a lot. I think that Bates does a good job of utilizing mismatches. He has the ability to create his own shots anywhere inside of the half court. We've seen his ability to pull up from deep and really show his ability in the perimeter shots. Ultimately, I buy into the potential here. I think that Emoni Bates' potential is just now starting to be there in terms of scratching the surface. If he's able to buy into the role that Kenny Payne and company would have set out for him. Now, obviously, he would have to commit to Louisville, so this is just kind of a hypothetical forward line of thinking. But here's my thing. If Kenny Payne and the coaching staff determine that, hey, this is a guy we want on this team, I'm not going to disagree with them. Payne and company have been long revered as, solid developers of talent, and being able to spot, some very highly talented guys. And I think that if Kenny Payne wants him on this team, then I think I'm going to support that. Kenny Payne has not shown me anything to show me that he's not trustworthy in that realm. So if he were to prioritize Emoni Bates and try to get him on next year's squad, and let's say he commits, I think that there is a role for him on next year's team. Now, what that role is, I don't necessarily know. I do know that it's probably going to be more as a wing rather than a point guard. I think that his skill set better suits himself as a wing, being able to utilize that perimeter shooting, playing off ball, and be able to create and utilize mismatches. And I like the effort on the defensive end. So trying to write off Emoni Bates already when he's only 18 years old, I think it's a little bit premature, like I said. And, a back injury can definitely be a little tricky. He missed a lot of time last season with that back injury, came back right at the end of the season into postseason play. So, it's a little bit tricky, and you can't really expect a guy to develop when he's hurt. When you have a back injury, it's not something that you can really kind of continue to develop your game and progress your skill set. So if Kenny Payne and company over the offseason are able to get him into the weight room and add some more weight onto his frame to where he's able to operate a little bit more smoothly in the half court, and then not only that, but also being able to get him to buy into a role as a wing and allowing him, to operate comfortably with his skill set, and being able to refine some of those skills and develop his game as a whole. I really, really think that Emoni Bates has a career in the NBA. In fact, I think that his game is probably better suited for the NBA rather than college ball. But ultimately, I really do think that if Kenny Payne and company want Emoni Bates on this team, I'm with them. I support them 100%. I know that this is a little bit, somewhat of an unpopular opinion, but the upside is there. If Emoni Bates is able to start putting things together, let's say he does come to Louisville next season, I mean, the sky is the limit if he's able to start putting things together. Obviously, hypothetically speaking, because it still has to come to fruition, he would have to commit to Louisville, and he would obviously have to, develop a substantial bit and also, add some more weight onto his frame, but ultimately would bring a solid wing option to the University of Louisville. So with that being said, there's another wing that is in the 2022 recruiting class. That is Tyrell Ward, former Xavier signee who decommitted when Travis Steele was let go. He is looking to probably cut his list in late April, but he would bring a lot of great things to the Louisville Cardinals at the wing position as well. We're going to talk about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started taking Athletic Greens because I'm not a huge fan of, vitamin pills and stuff like that, but I still wanted to have better gut health, more energy, optimized immune system, all that stuff. Athletic Greens is able to meet my needs. With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing about 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, etc. I personally consume it because, this time of the year, my allergies are really acting up. My immune system, I'm in full on go mode a lot with my day job, so my immune system kind of takes a toll. But that's where Athletic Greens kind of steps in. So to make it easy, however, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/college. Once again, that is athleticgreens.com/college to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. As I mentioned, a week from today, that is Thursday, April 28th, tune in to Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Odyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special, hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson Show, all week leading up to the first pick. As I mentioned, Tyrell Ward is one of the highest rated guys left in the 2022 recruiting class that has yet to sign. I completely botched that transition, so I apologize. The Hyattsville, Maryland native is ranked as the 36th best player in the class, 10th best small forward. That is according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. When you watch his game, you can tell right away that he has an advanced scoring repertoire. I think his ability to score at all 3 levels, but not only that, but to be able to create his own shot and not need a lot of space to do so. That's where I think that, the the hype around his offensive game really takes off. Jerry Meyer, the director of basketball scouting for 24/7 Sports, has him projected as a first-round selection and has compared him to New Orleans Pelicans guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He had this to say about Tyrell Ward: has positive length for a 6'7" wing player, gets out in transition and finishes well. Thin frame at this point, but plays through contact. Quick leaper off the floor, and has quality body control. Has an athletic and accurate shooting stroke from deep. Can make tough threes off the dribble and off the move on the catch. Has a dangerous pull-up jumper and can get to the rim. Has a solid and functional handle and will find open teammates. Rebounding should improve with added strength. Is a disruptor on defense with ability to get into passing lanes, and is a multi-positional defender. In terms of his college list, he is hearing from LSU, Georgetown, Xavier, Indiana, the Cardinals, Maryland, Providence, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, so on and so forth. But when you heard Kenny Payne in his introductory press conference describe what he's looking for in a player, it's a player that plays hard, defends well, and gets out and runs in transition. I feel like Tyrell Ward checks off all of those boxes. As Jerry Meyer alluded to, he's a plus-level defender, is switchable on defense, has a ton of defensive versatility, which is one of the more valuable skill sets when it comes to NBA draft scouting, is how well can a defender not only guard his position, but also with how motion offenses work in the National Basketball Association, how can he guard other positions? And the fact that he can guard, the 2 through really kind of the 1 through 3, and sometimes the 4, depending on the size of the power forward. But Jerry said it best. I think he's got to add a little bit of weight. That's where I do think that he would see a rotational role in the Cardinals, rotation next season. How much of a role would that be? That's still yet to be determined. You wouldn't really be able to predict that until you saw how Kenny Payne fills out the rest of the roster. So reminds me somewhat of Kamari Lands in the sense that they don't need a lot of space to pull up, especially from behind the arc. I think that Ward does a little bit better job of creating his own shot. Really a microwave scorer, can score in a lot of different ways. Crafty when it comes to scoring around the basket, and I think that as it comes to pure scorers, it's hard to really make a comparison because not a lot of players are able to score at all 3 levels, let alone be able to do it by creating their own offense. So what would a role potentially look like next season for Tyrell Ward within the Cardinals program? I don't think he would be a starter. I do think that if he were to commit, I think he would be competing with guys like Kamari Lands for playing time. He's a player that could see playing time early, but as that frame starts to fill out, I think he's likely a 2-and-done type guy. Year 2, he could really break onto the scene and become a possible star. I'm very, very high on Tyrell Ward's skill set. I think that his skills are very translatable to the NBA, and I do think that he could play some of the 2, some of the 3 with his quickness. So, it's been said Louisville needs guards. How about adding a 6'7" guard that can play either as the 2 or the 3? But in terms of where the Cardinals sit in his respective recruitment, I wish I had more information. All I know is that the coaching staff is continuing to, trying to build a solid relationship to where it puts the Cardinals within the mix. I think it was reported by a couple outlets. I think Cardinal Authority is what someone was telling me, was saying that he is likely going to cut his list at the end of April, like April 29th, April 30th. So if Louisville is included in that list, obviously that is big news for the Cardinals. But ultimately it will come down to trying to get him on campus. And, obviously his skill set would be a huge addition to the program next season. The final section of the show, I want to take a step back and go towards women's basketball in terms of the season next year. Jeff Walz added another transfer, and that is Syracuse guard Chrislyn Carr. We will talk about what she brings to the table to this Louisville Cardinals team here in just a little while after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting, stats, and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. I literally mentioned on yesterday's podcast, when I was talking about some of the concerns or questions for next year's team, for the Louisville women's basketball team, there were two questions. Number one, how does Jeff Walz approach the point guard position next season? And number two, does he add another post presence? Well, the first question has been answered. Syracuse transfer Chrislyn Carr committed to the program on Wednesday evening. The 5'5" senior from Davenport, Iowa, spent the past season at Syracuse. That came after spending 3 before that at Texas Tech. First year with the Red Raiders, was one of the best freshmen in the country, won Big 12 Freshman of the Year, was in contention for National Freshman of the Year, averaging 17.9 points per game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and essentially 2 steals. The year after that took a little bit of a step down in production, 14 points per game, but 4 rebounds and 5 assists. In 2020-21, only appeared in 5 games, and then this past season for the Orange, her lone season at Syracuse, she started all 29 games, playing about 36.6 minutes per contest, averaging 14.2 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.3 steals, also shooting the ball 37.2% from behind the arc. So, just around a week after Jeff Walz added Morgan Jones to the team, a hybrid guard/forward that will likely slide into the starting spot that Emily Ingsler is leaving behind. Well, it seems like the Cardinals have found a player that will be taking Kiana Smith's starting spot. That is Chrislyn Carr. At Syracuse, she showed that, obviously the Orange weren't the greatest team this year, but she showed, solid defensive, production, obviously solid perimeter shooting production as well. She's been a great perimeter shooter all of her seasons in college, and she is a veteran point guard, and that's something that I think that, kind of fits along the same, line of thinking of getting Chelsea Hall into the program last year. Is let's get a veteran point guard who's played a lot of meaningful high Division I minutes and be able to run the offense. And I think that Chrislyn Carr will do a great job of sliding into that role. So I said Kiana Smith, sliding into Kiana Smith's role. I think it's more so sliding into Chelsea Hall's starting role. So you replace Chelsea Hall with Chrislyn Carr, who I think is a little bit better of a facilitator, defensively speaking, averaging over a steal per game. So fits into the identity of the Louisville program, which seems like, defensive minded and very solid on that end of the court. So, I like this fit next to Haley Van Lith, next to Morgan Jones, and along with Olivia Cochran and Liz Dixon, because you have a backcourt, and let's say it's a 3-player backcourt. Morgan Jones listed as a guard, listed as a forward. I don't think it really matters with positionless basketball, but you have a possible number 1 scoring option in Haley Van Lith, who is budding into a star. Has been since the start of ACC play this past January. is likely to take the next step forward in not only facilitating, but also just being able to create her own shot, trying to maybe even have a role sort of like Aisha Durr to where she is the go-to scoring option. You have an athletic 6'2" combo guard that really operates well in the mid-range, not necessarily a perimeter shooter, but a very good defender, very athletic, finishes well around the rim, and is very crafty in the mid-range. And now you add a versatile playmaker that does a good job of getting her teammates the ball in open spaces, does a great job of facilitating, ball handling, but also is able to hold her own scoring-wise, a solid perimeter shooter, shooting just under 40% from behind the arc, which is very, very solid. So I really like this addition. I think that the Cardinals needed a true point guard for next season. I think that Hailey Van Lith can share the ball handling responsibility, but I think that at the end of the day, that allowing Hailey to focus more on the scoring aspect of it, gives her the opportunity to, maximize her production. So ultimately, I really, really like this addition for Jeff Walz. You go out and you get your starting point guard, or at the very, very least, you go get some point guard depth. And at the end of the day, having very talented players, as I mentioned, part of me is a believer in taking the best available players and worrying about the fit later. But I think you're getting a very talented player, but I'm also probably maybe even more encouraged by the way that I think that Carr can coexist with Hailey Van Lith and Morgan Jones in the Louisville backcourt. So I don't know the scholarship breakdown yet. As of right now, if it was a regular year, I think they have 16 scholarship players. I don't necessarily know if that changes or what that changes with, the COVID rule and stuff like that, with Mikasa Robinson, Liz Dixon, and Alana Smith all coming back. I don't know what that means for open scholarships. So I don't know if they're over the limit. I'm not really informed enough to know how many spots they have left. So I do apologize about that. But let's say that Jeff Walz is still looking to add players to next year's team. I think that the next thing to address is the thing that we talked about. It's probably more size in the paint, maybe going out and getting a starting power forward. As of right now, it seems like you're going with inexperience, like Alexia Mobley. You have Nyla Harris, Imani Lester, so on and so forth. So I think that two key additions that could be the difference in Louisville being an Elite Eight team and going back to the Final Four. The Syracuse pipeline lives on. First Emily Ingsler, now Chrislyn Carr. I think it's interesting to see, Jeff Walz going against or going out and getting players that, there's a familiarity aspect of it, whether or not that the Cardinals have played against some of these players in years past, or they were players that he recruited out of high school. Morgan Jones was a player he recruited out of high school, but also played against the Cardinals, multiple times and succeeded. So I'm interested to see who else he would be looking to bring in, assuming that the Cardinals are still working on the roster. So, sorry, it's a little late in the night if you can't tell. But hey, that is going to do it all for this episode of the show. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. There will be an episode tomorrow with Tony Wiggins, the host of Locked On NFL. We'll talk about some of the former Cards in the NFL, Lamar Jackson, Devontae Parker, and Teddy Bridgewater. Do yourself a favor. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I do want to extend my deepest condolences to Chris Mack and his family for the passing of his father, dealing with a big health issue. I believe it was cancer. Just want to extend my thoughts out to Chris Mack and company. I know he's no longer the University of Louisville head men's basketball coach, but still, he will always be a Cardinal for life, in my opinion. And regardless, anytime anyone is struggling with that, it's so much bigger than sports, and we do send our thoughts to the Mack family. I just want to let you know that there is a new YouTube page. It has over 200 subscribers now. Thank you so much for everyone that is subscribing on all streaming services, both video and audio. Thank you to all those that are listening, sharing, subscribing, rating the podcast on whatever streaming service they use. I definitely appreciate it. We are coming up here in probably about a month for episode number 200. There will be a Fan Friday special episode where there will be a contest on Twitter in which a fan will be able to come onto the show and serve as a special guest, and we'll talk about the Louisville Cardinals and whatever topics they want to discuss. So keep an eye out on Twitter. You can follow my personal Twitter in the graphic below. But hey, that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here